Rogan claims the Earth is currently in a cooling period despite evidence indicating rapid temperature increase due to human activity. So this thing that it threw in, despite evidence indicating rapid temperature increases due to human activities, that is propaganda. Because there's just as much information on the web that backs up Rogan's claims that the Earth is currently in a current cooling period. So there's evidence for both. I actually don't know that there's evidence indicating rapid temperature increases, but I know that that's the established propaganda. But the fact that it chose to double down despite evidence indicating our fake climate science fictions are true, I'm paraphrasing, that is showing us that this is not objective. This is not objectively scouring the web for information on the climate conversation. This ChatGPT is programmed to sway people in a specific way, despite evidence indicating, right? So what it's doing is it's just throwing it in. I said earlier, repetition is how we learn. Repetition is also the propagandist's #1 tool. So it needs to go back, right? Like, so the way the brain works is, Rogan claims the Earth is currently in a cooling period, right? If that was the end of the sentence, which is true, and what happened, we don't need ChatGPT to editorialize, and that's what it's doing by tossing in that bit at the end, then that's the last thing that's gone into the brain. The brain might chew on that. Oh, is the Earth currently in a cooling period? But this ChatGPT, because it's a propagandist and not an objective tool, it doesn't want us to think for ourselves, so it needs to sandwich the objective neutral information with its own programmed perspective despite evidence. The despite is the issue. Let's look up what despite means. Despite means without being prevented by, in spite of, against, or in defiance of, notwithstanding. So throwing in despite is giving more credence and relevance to the indicating rapid temperature increases than Joe Rogan's perspectives. This is not neutral. This is not balanced. If we had scales of justice, by putting in despite evidence, now it tips. Now we're leaning into despite evidence indicating rapid temperature increase. It is not this tool's job to take sides on an issue. It is its job, as is the journalist's job, to give us neutral information and allow us to decipher meaning on our own. So be mindful that ChatGPT is a lying propagandist, okay? But we're gonna. So what we want to be mindful of when we're checking for propaganda is anything that indicates that it's taking a side, that it favors a perspective, that one way is the right way. So by throwing in overwhelming evidence, overwhelming is an opinion. Overwhelming is a judgment. If we're considering ChatGPT like a journalist, like journalists are supposed to be, not our modern day fakey propagandist incarnation or iteration, overwhelming. So let's say this is a New York Times article. And let's say I'm the editor of a New York Times and ChatGPT is one of my writers and ChatGPT turns this into me. I would circle the word overwhelming in bright red, put an X through it and say, try again. Because it is not the journalist or ChatGPT's job to determine whether the evidence is overwhelming or not. What is overwhelming for me is not necessarily going to be overwhelming for you. What is overwhelming for Joe is not necessarily going to be overwhelming for Lily, right? That is subjective, and that is what this is not supposed to do. It could say highlighted the evidence supporting it, right? But by throwing in overwhelming, we already know that whatever this is saying is slanted. So for anyone on propaganda alert or teaching your children to be mindful and how not to be swayed, look for judgmental words, opinions being passed off as fact.